So I'm going to start the program. Welcome everyone. Oh, I'm hearing feedback. Is that okay?
Trying.
Okay. Thank you for being here. I'm Mary Chumo, and I'm on the board of directors of the Bolton Historical.
If you want to pull that off, they'll see you.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, we good? I'm on the board of directors of the Bolton Historical Society, and I also volunteer at Sawyer House, which is the society's headquarters. Sawyer House is located across the street from the First Parish Church at 676 Main Street. We're open to the public on Thursday afternoons from 1 to 3:30, but we can always make arrangements for other times, so we'd love to see you down there. So we're going to begin this program with a few images that give us a really lovely and clear view of life in Bolton at the turn of the century. The images were taken by Oliver Everett, who was Bolton's doctor for 33 years from 1885 to 1919. And his son and grandson donated to the society over 125 of his glass plate negatives, which we have digitized along with the camera that he used. As a side note, Dr. Everett died from the flu on January 2nd, 1919, most likely from attending to patients during the influenza epidemic in 1918, 1919. So, you know, it's sort of current. So here we have a picture of two good friends. Dr. Oliver Everett is the gentleman on the left, and his good friend, the Reverend Joseph Pardee, who was the minister at the First Parish Church. So we're looking west up toward the Great Road and the town center. This is taken from the parsonage, which is of the First Parish Church. If you'll note, you can see that the town hall is not brick encased, and the First Parish Church, this church burnt down in 1926, and the present First Parish Church stands there today. And as you can see, all of the fields behind Main Street were all cleared at that time. Where they're now all woodlands, it was all cleared back then. So now we're looking east on the Great Road. The building on the right, this building here, which is across from Town Hall, began as the Bolton Shoe Company. Back in the mid-1800s, shoemaking was an important business in Bolton, and a joint stock company was formed called the Bolton Shoe Company, and it had 22 people investing in it. And it was here that they operated and made shoes until the 1970s, when, the 1870s, when newer methods for making shoes came into existence, and the shop was closed. It then became Robinson's Hall, with the first floor having a dining room and a kitchen, and on the second floor they had a meeting room and a stage. So it sort of served as a function hall for a number of years, and then it became a home in 1912. This vehicle right here is the school barge, which carried the school children to the schoolhouses. Now we're looking at the Great Road looking east, and it doesn't look that different than when it does today. If you can see way off to the left here where I've got the cursor, this is now Pond Park, but at the time it was a mill area, and in it there was a sawmill, woodworking and blacksmith shops, and a carriage painting shop. So it was sort of like the industrial park of Bolton at the time. Around 1900, a group formed called the Village Improvement Society, and they bought this land and tore down the buildings, and they created Pond Park. Also, if you can note, that the oil burning street lights and also hitching posts for the horses. Now we're looking on the north side of Great Road, and the buildings from left to right this is where we now have the town common, and this building was torn down to make way for the common. But this was Dr. Everett's house back then, and the building next to it was his shop. He also added a post office to it and built this section on and ran a soda fountain. And I will take any questions if you have during the course of this program. Now we're across the street and we are looking east. We're looking west, I'm sorry, at the Wattaquatic Road intersection. That's the Cracker Barrel building. This is the little red house on the corner. The two little girls here are Charlotte Pardee in the Cape and Eleanor Everett, Dr. Everett's daughter. If you note the chicken in the front yard, and also across the street, Dr. Everett ran the telephone exchange, and here on the lamppost is a sign for the telephone exchange. He was paid $30 by the telephone company to rent space in his office for a telephone that had a line out to Clinton. Here we have the brick store, now known as the Cracker Barrel. It was Bolton's main store in business for over 150 years. It opened in 1820. And back then you could get practically anything there, from lemons and spices to fish, snowshoes, Christmas trees, because Route 117, known as the Great Road back then, was your access road into Boston. So they got anything that was needed to supply their store there. So here we are at Jackson Corner. If anyone recognize this, this is the corner of Main Street and Harvard Road. The carriage here is Hartwell's delivery wagon, and he came from Berlin. He either came from Berlin or Hudson to deliver meat and other items to the residents. And that house is still there on the corner, but the barn is now gone. This is William Dow's Stagecoach in front of A. Knowlton's store in downtown Hudson. Dow operated a stage line that carried passengers, freight, and mail that ran from Bolton into Hudson. So this was sort of your, this is how you were able to get from town to town if you didn't have a horse and buggy. And here we have Dr. Warren Houghton on his Crestmobile. He was the town's first dentist, and he had the first car in Bolton. The car was made by Crest Manufacturing Company in Cambridge, Massachusetts. They built cars between 1901 and 1904. This 1904 model was a touring car and sold for around $850 at that time. So Dr. Houghton lived across the street from Town Hall. His house is still there. Now we move on to schools, and here is a picture of the school barge. The driver of the barge is James Wheeler, who lived on Randall Road. The need for transportation for schools began around 1896 when the district schools were consolidated in the town center. And I'm going to the next image is of the three district schools that were set up in the town center. Before that, these one-room schoolhouses were positioned all over town. And when there was a need to build a schoolhouse, they would build one. If there was the need was no longer needed, they would move it to another area. But by the turn of the century, they decided that they were going to locate the schools in one location, and that was where the Emerson School now stands. So the three district schools houses consisted of a primary school, which was grades 1 through 3, intermediate school, grades 4 through 6, and the grammar school, which was grades 7 through 8. Here's a picture of the center school class of 1900. The center school, the building still exists. It is the small, looks like a garage next to the public safety building on Wattaquaquit Hill Road. It began as the Baptist Church, then it became the Hearst House, and now the fire department, and now it's used by Parks and Rec. Here we have a picture of the students running out of the Houghton School. It was the high school from 1849 to 1917, and the junior high, it became a junior high after that, 1917. So a gentleman by the name of Joseph Houghton provided the money to build the school, but in his will, he stipulated that the descendants of 9 individuals were to be excluded from attending the school for 100 years. And coincidentally, those 9 individuals happened to be as former assessors of the town. This went to court. It actually reached the state Supreme Court, so it took a number of years for the school to finally open as a high school. His will also prohibited teachers from teaching there for more than 2 years. And again, that was contested. And by 1916, they did away with that. So the first graduating class for the Houghton High School was 1892. And here is your class of 1898. And we have the names of all of these individuals. If anyone is interested on many of these photos, group photos, we have people who have added the names on the back of the images.
Mary, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
I'm surprised that there's not more kids in this class at the time. I mean, everybody had so many children. That was the whole class.
That was the whole class. Now, mind you, this is the high school. Not everybody attended high school.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right.
So, and surprisingly, there are as many girls as there are boys.
Yeah. It looks like there's more girls
Mary?
than boys.
Yes. Mary, just a question, were there a lot of kids who lived on the Hudson edges and went to Hudson High instead of here or like Clinton?
That was much later, Leslie.
Oh, okay. Just curious.
So I do know that once the high school became a junior high, then back in 1917, then yes, they had to go to high school elsewhere, and I believe Hudson was the high school they went to. So you're right there.
Okay, thanks.
So here's the Emerson School, built in 1923. It was a memorial gift in honor of his wife and daughter from a very wealthy gentleman by the name of Edward Emerson. And it replaced those 3 district schoolhouses that I showed in an earlier image. And here is the graduating class of 1943. Now there are names that you may recognize. In here is Nancy Whitcomb, Joan Shartner, Mildred Smith, Beth Randall, Norman Babcock, all Bolton names that many of you are familiar with today. And here we have a group called the Wattaquaquit Campfire Girls. And Esther Whitcomb, who was the, and this is Esther right here, she was known as the town historian, and she was active in the Historical Society, and she is the author of the book about Bolton. And finally, we have a 4-H cooking class. And I believe that is taking place in the kitchen of the First Parish Church.
The battered beaters.
Thank you. So now we're moving on to storms. So this is not a great image. We don't have a lot of images of this particular storm. This is on the corner of the Great Road near Harvard Road. And this is damage from the ice storm of 1921. This ice storm was considered one of the worst storms in New England history. It sent high winds and freezing rain raging for 75 hours, leaving an accumulation of 4 inches of ice on trees, power lines, and roofs. It was much worse than the ice storm we experienced back in 2008. And here is another example of some of the damage from that particular storm on Norse Road. Here we have a group of people very happily shoveling the sidewalk in the town center in the 1920s. This had to be before 1926 because the church in the background was the one that burnt down back then. And that same year, we have a gentleman plowing the sidewalk in front of Town Hall using a horse-drawn homemade board plow. This is some of the damage caused by the hurricane of 1938, and this is along Main Street, the Great Road in the town center. And then we have the blizzard of 78, February 5th, 1978. That took place 44 years ago. And I'm trying to figure out what this would be. I'm imagining,
It's the top of a car.
It is, Alice. Okay, that's what I thought.
It's my little gremlin poking out.
Ah. For
I
those of
barely
you,
made it home that night.
I bet. For those of you
But
who don't
The
know
wind must
Alice,
have uncovered the back of it.
so Alice lives in the little red house on the corner of Wattaquatic and Main Street today. So now we're going to move on to churches. And this is an image of the Hillside Church. There was a split between the liberal and evangelical wings of the Congregational Church in the early 1800s. And a very influential citizen of Bolton, SVS Wilder, built this church on his land back in 1928. On raising day, when they were raising the walls, he paid workers 25 cents extra not to drink. It was very common back then to fortify yourself with a few drinks if you were going to do hard labor. But Wilder, being a temperance man, paid them extra not to. So this church operated for 31 years. Today, there's the inscribed cornerstone of the church now rests on that little triangle piece of land where Wilder, Old Bay, and Ballfield roads intersect. The society had this cornerstone inscribed back in 1967. Hard to find. You almost have to, pull over and get out of your car because it's sort of tucked in the middle of this triangle piece of land. This is the First Baptist Church. It was a Victorian Gothic style built in 1866 to replace the little meeting house on Wattaquatic Hill Road that I showed earlier that when it was being used as a schoolhouse. In in 1931, it merged with the Federated Church. And in the hurricane of 38, it suffered such significant damage that it had to be torn down. Surprisingly, this is now the parking lot for the Houghton building. This building right here to the left was the horse shed in the back. And this building still exists. So this is one of my favorite pictures. This is an Everett picture, and it's of school, not church children. It's a Unitarian picnic on Little Pond. And it is such a fabulous, fabulous picture. This is the Quaker Meeting House. It was built around 1789. It stood at the intersection of Berlin and Fry Roads in the Fryville section on John Fry's land. Just like the Baptist Church, because of dwindling numbers, they merged with the Federated Church in 1931. And this building was moved to Sturbridge Village in 1954. So anyone who has been to Sturbridge Village has seen this building there. And I believe to this day, they still once a year hold a Quaker service and invite Bolton people to attend. And this is the first parish church. It was built in 1793 as the second meeting house, replacing the first meeting house that was set back from the Great Road close to the fire station. It held church services and town meetings until 1833, which is why it was called the meeting house. But in 1833, Massachusetts legislation separated church and state. It then became the property of the first parish church. And here it is, unfortunately, burning down on December 26, 1926. So we're moving on to celebrations, and this is the old folks concert, and that is Dr. Oliver Everett at the piano. This is around 1902, and this was at Town Hall. If you notice back here, this is one of the Civil War plaques that's still on the wall at Town Hall, and this was a stage. That's why when you come in the back way of Town Hall, you have to go downstairs because you're actually on the stage when you enter, and then you go down. Here's another image of the stage. This is Memorial Day, again, 1902. The stage is decorated in honor of President William McKinley, who was assassinated the previous September. This stage was used for all sorts of events, school events, celebrations. And here we have Bolton's Bicentennial Parade back in 1938. This is the Knitting Club float. It was a 2-day celebration with parade, pageants, reenactments, historical tours, and fireworks. And here is another image of that bicentennial where you have a group of young people dressed in costume dancing the minuet. 4th of July, 1972, a group of people gathering for the ringing of the bells in front of the First Parish Church. In the early 1800s, the standard way to celebrate the 4th was to ring the meeting house bells. It was readopted for a while back in the 1970s. And again, I'm going to read off some of the people because they may be names that you recognize from right to left. James Menser, Florence Sawyer. There's Florence. I recognize Florence. Leslie Harvey, Vera Ware, Beverly Mensa, Anita Menser, the Peach family, and the Tiaminga families. Right there. 4th of July Parade, 1973. Here is Gordon Slater's protest float with the headstone reading, "Rest in peace, ye Bolton taxpayer, perished at the grubby hands of the school committee." I believe this still stands on the at the corner of Long Hill Road and Meadow Road, although I think the writing has faded since. So we're moving on to the Bolton Fair, which began as the Bolton Cattle Show in the 1900s. This is the early 1900s, but the cattle show began in 1874 on what is now known as the Bolton Fair, and it began as a one-day affair held on Wednesdays. Throngs of people, you can see, I mean, those are a lot of people on the town common. So this is Town Hall. Behind it oh, sorry. Behind it is the Farmers and Mechanics Hall where dinners were served and the exhibitions were shown in the town hall. So here is another example of the cattle show back in 1920. And by 1952, the fair, it was now called the Bolton Fair, and it moved across the street. And so here is the midway off of Mechanic Street. We have the food booth at the fair, 1963. Some of the women here are Noel Hansen, Dot Brown, Dot Menser, Mrs. Kramer, and Dot Shartner. Interesting, there were a lot of Dots or Dorothys back then. And here we have Harold Brown, our former DPW director, with his prize-winning calf, and this is around 1959. That's a great picture. This is Albert the pig with owner Dot Brown, Harold's mother. This is 1984. Albert has a little toy gun on his collar there, and it's a commentary about the previous year's pig wars in Bolton. It was where newcomers versus old timers, new developments being built in areas close to pig farms. And a special town meeting was held in July with a citizen's petition to amend the zoning bylaws to ban farmers from raising more than 8 pigs at a time. It became quite an issue. It received national attention, and even Time magazine weighed in with an article where it coined Bolton as being a rhubarb, which is a ruburbia, which is a combination of a rural and a suburban type of town. And here we have a craft fair when the fair was still over by the schools, 1993. And a former town clerk, Betsy Cousin, taking tickets at the Mechanic Street entrance. This is 1993. And Betsy was the town clerk before Pam Powell. And this is Ada Woolston in the Fiber Arts exhibit with her Angora rabbit truffles. Every effort was made to keep the fair in Bolton, but due to loss of field space and parking, the Bolton Fair now takes place at the Lancaster Fairgrounds, and it's going to be held this year from August 12th to the 14th, and it will be its 139th year, which is amazing. So moving on to pets. So this is a picture of the Reverend Scharf and his wife with their kitty. Mr. Scharf, this is a very formal photo. You know, they brought the rocking chair outside and they set themselves up. Kitty, and if you can see, is wearing a bow. The Reverend Scharf was the minister of the Baptist Church from 1891 to 1903. This is an Everett photo, and this is the Taylor family. It must have been a special occasion. They came out with their 4 pets. 3 of the pets are easy to identify: the horse, the dog in the wagon, and the parrot here. The 4th cat is a little harder to find because she's sitting right there, probably ready to leap out of her little owner's lap, and that's their kitty. The father, George Taylor, was a blacksmith shop, and they lived at 421 Great Road. His house is still there. It's just west of Burnham Road. Another Everett photo. This is Frank Wheeler's horse, Lady, and the dog Pilot. Wheeler lived on Wattaquatic in what is now the Trinity Church Parsonage, which is the house that you can see right here. This is Emmeline Wood with her horse Phyllis and dog Punch. Emmeline lived on the family farm on Long Hill Road. And then here's one of our favorite characters. It's Don, the Staffordshire Bull Terrier. So he's very handsome in his leather-studded collar and somehow has been propped up on a table. He was owned by Caroline Newton, who lived on South Bolton Road on the corner of South Bolton and South Bolton, oh goodness, Spectacle Hill Road. He was so loved by his owner that Caroline's 1903 will requested that to give Don, if he be living, a good home. But unfortunately, her cats did not fare as well because the will stipulated that they receive a quiet burial. So here is Don again with his owner, Caroline, and her friend, Mrs. Edwin Rice. Carol was she was a popular school teacher, and in 1878 became the first woman to serve on the school committee. And finally, in pets, we have Catherine Rowe Davidson with her show dog. She was a well-known breeder and trainer of spaniels. There were many breeders in town certain times. I do know at the Wilder Mansion, there was one individual who bred Great Danes, and I'm not sure if that was back in the 70s or 80s. So now we're moving on to people to conclude our show. And this is an image of young Esther Whitcomb. She was the town historian, as I said before, and one of the founding members of the Bolton Historical Society. And here is Esther in later life in Town Hall. This is John Smith in front of his gas station. It was a Sokney, if I'm pronouncing it right, gas station. And this is around 1930. Here's a group of fine-looking young men. It's the muster team of 1948. Many of them have just returned from the war. From left to right, we have Harold Babcock, Richard Hines, Edwin Haskell, Gigi Bonazzoli, Milton Demeronville, Welby McCollum, Harry Brazow, and Harold Hines. Great photos. A lovely picture of Vera Slade, 1972. She was the town clerk in the 1950s and the grandmother of Chris, Paul, and Mark Slade. Here is Bill and Rita Whistle sitting in front of their old time shop, 1969. Does anyone remember when this was an antique shop?
Yes.
I think it was when I moved in here in the 2000, early 2000, it was still in operation. But I think by Alice, you can help me on this, maybe about 2003, 4, it
Somewhere in there, yeah. They sold.
It went away.
Died and Rita sold up, and she's still alive.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
I got a Christmas card from her.
Good. Where are they living? Where's she living now?
In Ringe, New Hampshire, with one of their daughters.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Ann and I remember that when we first moved to town. We bought a few antiques from there.
Yeah, I went in there a couple of times, never bought anything though. So here we have at Sawyer House, we have Warren Colby, William Toth at Sawyer House. Again at Sawyer House, we have Don Smith here and Joe Zacone. Must have been an event back then. And we have, again at Sawyer House, this is Florence Sawyer in her rocking chair and her neighbor Noel Hanson on her with. It's celebrating her birthday. And this is Charlie and Dot Brown in costume for Bolton's 250th parade celebration back in 1988. Shirley Bonazzoli, who was Gigi's wife. She was very active in town affairs. She started the Bolton Girl Scouts, was in the fire department's women auxiliary, worked on the town census committee and voter registration, and was very active in her church. And here is Rona Balco with her daycare children. She ran a daycare. And this is Anita Hooker in her tulip garden. Anita is with Nan Norcein's mother. She was a master gardener, and her home and gardens were featured in magazines. Her house is on the corner of Main Street and Manor Road, and it's now home to Wendy Harrop and her business, the Phineas Wright House. This is Ginny Murphy at her home, which is the former Goss Mansion, which is the big house up the rise next to the library. This was a reconciliation ceremony for Bolton's first minister, the Reverend Thomas Goss, who built this house. He was Bolton's first minister, but unfortunately he was asked to leave the church and replaced. It was thought because of his authoritative manner. But there's also speculation that he was also a loyalist. We do know that his son, Thomas Goss Jr. was a loyalist, and this was back during the Revolutionary War times. We have Mary Ann Zaker at her vegetable stand on Green Road. They sold the house a couple of years ago, so we can no longer buy corn and other vegetable at their farm stand, which I miss greatly.
Me too.
And here is Callista Coggeshall putting up the open sign at Sawyer House.
Great photo.
Yeah. And Warren Wilson at his pumpkin patch where he sold pumpkins. Warren farmed crops and livestock on his home on Long Hill Road. He wrote the popular column, The View from the Pumpkin Patch, which appeared in the weekly Bolton Common newspaper. And he was also Bolton's police chief from 1964 to 1996.
Our son Jeff worked for him.
What, Leslie?
I would say our son Jeff worked for him several summers when he was in high school.
Did he work on the
on the farm?
Oh, cool.
On the pumpkins. Always came home dirty.
I bet. So this is Lois Alex, our former town clerk. She was so beloved that a quilt was made in her honor, and it's the quilt that now hangs on the wall in the Houghton Building meeting room. And this is Lois dancing with Gigi Bonazzoli. In 1992, Gigi, wife of Shirley, was selectman, firefighter, and the EMT ambulance director. Here we have Jack Holbrook, 1996 image. He was the deputy chief of the Bolton Fire Department. Jack now lives in Stowe, not too far. And we're going to conclude with a picture of Barbara Brown leading a country dance to raise money for the DARE program. The DARE program was the Drug Abuse Resistance and Education program. And on that, we conclude our program. Any questions?
This is Bob Tattersall. I have a question for you.
Yes.
Do you know if there's any pictures of the Josiah Whitcomb Garrison house before that was taken down? Is there a picture of that house? No.
All we have is what they have now. When they did the dig back in the, when did they do the dig, Alice? 80s?
The what?
The Garrison dig, 1980s?
Yeah, it may have been the late 70s.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I was always surprised at how small it appeared to be. If you look at the evidence there from the foundation, how small it was. But recently over at Old Sturbridge Village, they constructed the Rice House, and it's a very small house. And I was looking up that one day, and apparently in Sturbridge, there were, like, most of the houses were only between like 400 and like 900 square feet in it. And I saw some comment in there that some houses were as little as 100 square feet. I mean, I didn't think they built anything that small back then. But if you were on the frontier, which obviously this house was built when it was pretty much frontier, I guess they were that small.
Yeah.
I just was surprised at how small that place was.
Yeah, no walk-in closets or master baths. But
No.
if you go to the Garrison site, there is a
looking
plaque
at it,
there, and
yeah.
it does show what the house would have looked like, which was
Yeah.
a salt box. And his son, David Whitcomb, built a house pretty much identical out on Old Sugar Road that still stands. It's the oldest house in Bolton, built in
I didn't
1700.
realize that was kind of, that was,
Yeah.
I knew it was more or less the same vintage and that they were related, but yeah, the house does look, that small. The one that's not there anymore, it still looks like it was even smaller than is it the David Whitcomb house?
Yeah, I agree. When you go there, yeah, it is a small area.
Yeah. Interesting.
Anyone
Where-
else?
You happen to tape this, did you?
Nikki, Bolton Access is taping this for
Oh,
us.
okay, great. Yeah,
Thank you.
I love seeing pictures. I bought, a lot of different towns, their picture book. I think that's a series, of books that are around where it has a lot of pictures with captions on it, who it was and dates and stuff like that. And I don't know if anybody ever thought, I'm sure it's a lot of work. If anybody ever thought of doing one for Bolton.
Yes, we have considered it, but your comment, it's a lot of work, is what's kind of prevented us. We have almost 3,000 images at Sawyer House. So just going through those to figure out what to use would be a task in itself.
Yeah, maybe it's a someday.
Yeah. So if anyone has any more questions, you can contact us at Sawyer House, and that's what we're there for.
Well,
So
thank
thank
you.
you.
We really
This is really fun.
did.
Thank
you.
you. Thank you for joining us, everybody. Have a great day.
Thanks, Mary.
Thank you.